Chapter 4. Caro can defense, short variation. We will replay the main line and the important sublines, with pauses for tactics. Welcome back to our Caro can defense series. In Chapter 1, we saw Marcus can introduce the basic opening idea. In Chapter 2, Capablanca showed how black can restrain white's space advantage. In Chapter 3, Tal challenged the bishop directly with h4, and Botvinnik answered with central and queenside counterplay. Now we move to Linares 1998. White is Alexei Shirov, one of the most dangerous attacking players of his generation. Black is Visvanathan Anand, already one of the great universal players in modern chess. This game is our introduction to the short variation of the advanced Caro can. White develops quietly with knight f3 and bishop e2 instead of immediately chasing the bishop with h4 and g4. Your job in this lesson is to understand black's modern counterplay. Black develops the bishop, hits the center with c5, exchanges at the right moment, and then turns white's kingside space into endgame targets. e4. c6. Anand chooses the Caro can. As always, black prepares d5 and keeps the light-squared bishop free. d4. d5. Black challenges the center. e5. Shirov chooses the advance variation. White takes space and asks black to prove that the position is not too cramped. Bishop f5. The bishop comes out before e6. This is still the starting point of black's whole strategy in the advance Caro can. Knight f3. Here is the short variation setup. White develops normally and keeps the kingside flexible. White is not spending a tempo to chase the bishop yet. White wants quick development first. Now black builds the central structure. The move order matters. The bishop has already escaped, so e6 no longer creates the French defense problem of a trapped c8 bishop. Bishop e2. White chooses the quiet short variation development. The bishop goes to e2, white prepares to castle, and the position becomes a slower strategic fight. Let's see what happens if bishop d3 is played instead of bishop e2. Bishop d3. Bishop takes d3. Queen takes d3. This is the older exchange approach from chapters 1 and 2. White removes the bishop, but the queen can become a target after c5 and qb6. Let's return back to the main line. c5. Anand immediately attacks the base of white's pawn chain. This is the same Caro can lesson again. When white advances to e5, black must not simply sit behind the center. Black must challenge d4. Bishop e3. White develops and supports the center. The bishop also eyes the c5 square and prepares for possible queenside play. C takes d4. Black clarifies the center. This exchange reduces white's space advantage and asks white how the pieces will recapture. Knight takes d4. White recaptures with the knight. White keeps the c-pawn free and hopes for active piece play. Knight e7. A very typical Caro can knight move. The knight supports c6, can head to f5, and keeps black's structure flexible. c4. Shirov fights for space. White does not want black to get a comfortable Caro can structure for free. The c-pawn challenges d5 and opens the position while white is slightly ahead in development. Knight on the b-file to c6. Anand develops with tempo against the knight on d4. Black's idea is simple: if white's pieces occupy the center, black will challenge those pieces directly. Knight c3. White develops and adds more control over d5 and b5. This is a principled setup, but the center is now full of tension. Knight takes d4. Black exchanges one pair of knights. In the advance Caro can, black often welcomes exchanges if they reduce white's attacking potential and make the structure easier to handle. Bishop takes d4. White recaptures with the bishop. White's bishop is active, but it can also become a target after black opens the center. D takes c4. Anand takes on c4. Black is not grabbing a random pawn. Black is changing the pawn structure and preparing active development for the pieces. Bishop takes c4. Knight c6. Black develops with gain of time. The knight attacks the bishop on d4 and forces white to decide how to keep the initiative. Bishop b5. White pins the knight and keeps pressure. Shirov wants activity before black finishes development. Bishop e7. Calm and accurate. Black develops, prepares to castle, and does not panic about the pin. Kingside castles. Kingside castles. Both sides castle. White has active pieces, but black has completed development and the central tension has mostly disappeared. Bishop takes c6. White gives up the bishop pair and damages black's queenside structure. This is a serious strategic decision. White hopes the c-pawns will be weak, but black receives open lines and the two bishops are no longer an issue for white. B takes c6. Anand accepts the structure. The doubled pawns may look ugly, but they give black central control and an open b-file possibility. In the Caro can, structure is important, but activity is just as important. Knight e2. White reorganizes. The knight heads toward g3, where it can support kingside pressure. c5. Excellent. Black immediately uses the c-pawn to chase the bishop and gain space. The doubled pawn is not only a weakness, it is also a useful lever. Bishop c3. Queen b6. The queen becomes active. Black attacks b2 and keeps an eye on the king's side. This is a familiar advance Caro can theme: pressure the base of white's position while white tries to build an attack. Knight g3. Bishop g6. White brings the knight toward the king's side, and black calmly retreats the bishop. This is not the tall variation, but the same question returns: can white turn kingside space into a real attack? Queen g4. Rook on the a-file to d8. Shirov lines up pressure on the king's side. Anand answers by improving the rook and claiming the d-file. Black's counterplay stays central. h4. White pushes forward. Black plays h6 to stop h5 from arriving with too much force. This also gives the bishop a safe square on h7. h5. Bishop h7. The bishop retreats. Black has allowed white to gain space, but the bishop remains alive. This is the same defensive theme we saw with Botvinnik. the bishop may retreat, but if it survives, white's advanced pawns can become targets. f4. White supports the attack. The plan is clear, f5 may open lines, and the queen on g4 is ready to create threats. c4, check. Anand strikes with check. This is the key transition. Black uses the queenside pawn majority to gain time and disturb white's king before white's attack becomes dangerous. King h2. Bishop b4. The bishop comes to b4. Black fights for the dark squares and starts exchanging white's attacking pieces. f5. Shirov breaks through. White cannot wait forever. If the attack is going to work, the f-pawn must open lines now. E takes f5. Anand accepts the challenge. Black calculates that the opened lines will not be enough for white. Knight takes f5. Bishop takes f5. Black removes the active knight. This is a very important defensive idea. If white has an attacking piece on f5, do not admire it. Trade it if the position allows. Rook takes f5. Bishop takes c3. Black removes another active piece. After these exchanges, white still has pressure, but the attack has fewer attackers. B takes c3. Queen e6. The queen centralizes and attacks the rook. Black is now turning the position around. White's pieces are active, but they are also loose. Rook on the a-file to f1. Rook on the f-file to e8. Black brings another piece into the defense. The rook on e8 supports e5 pressure and prepares to contest the open files. Rook on first rank to f4. Rook d5. Anand activates the rook. This is the beginning of black's takeover. The rook enters the center, and white has to spend time defending rather than attacking. Rook e4. Rook e7. Black calmly reinforces. When defending against an attack, the best moment is often when you can stop calculating only threats and start improving your own pieces. Queen f4. Rook c7. The rook shifts to the c-file. Now the c-pawns and open files become black's main weapons. Rook takes c4. White wins the c-pawn, but this allows a major simplification. Sometimes a pawn capture is not free if it gives the opponent the exchange sequence they wanted. Queen takes f5. Black forces queens off. This is the practical defensive achievement. With queens gone, white's kingside space no longer feels like an attack. It becomes a set of pawns that can be targeted. Queen takes f5. Rook takes c4. The queens are exchanged, and black wins the rook on c4. The game has transformed into an endgame where black's rook activity is the main story. Queen b1. Rook d8. Black brings the rook back to an active file. The d-file and c-file give black clear entry routes. Queen b7. Rook takes c3. Black wins another pawn. White's queenside has collapsed, and black's rook is active. Queen takes a7. Rook on the c-file to c8. White takes a pawn, but black keeps coordination. Anand's rook returns to the c-file, ready to stop white's passed a pawn. a4. Rook a8. The rook gets in front of the pawn. This is the practical defensive method here. Black stops the a-pawn first, then tries to get full control before it advances too far. Queen c7. Rook on the d-file to c8. Black keeps improving the rook and pushes the queen away from active squares. Queen b7. Rook e8. Black switches files. The e5 pawn is a target, and black's rook is more active than white's queen. Queen c6. Rook on the a-file to c8. Anand repeats the pressure from another angle. White's queen is active, but she is mostly defending. Queen d7. Rook on the c-file to d8. The rook returns to the d-file. Black keeps control and avoids giving white a clean passed pawn race. Queen c7. Rook d5. The rook becomes fully active. Now black attacks e5 and prepares to liquidate white's central pawn. a5. Rook takes e5. Black wins the e-pawn. This is the strategic payoff. White's advanced center has disappeared, and black is ready to use the extra material and active rook. a6. Rook on 5th rank to e7. The rook on the 5th rank comes to e7. Black does not allow the a-pawn to run freely. Queen c6. Rook f8. Black defends accurately and prepares to activate the kingside pawns. King h3. Rook a7. The rook blockades the a-pawn. White's last major source of counterplay is now under control. g4. Rook on the f-file to a8. Black doubles attention on the a-pawn. The passed pawn is pinned down, and white's kingside pawns are becoming weak. King h4. Rook takes a6. Anand captures the passed pawn. Once this pawn falls, white has no real counterplay left. Queen b7. Rook a5. The rook stays active and attacks from the side. Queen c6. Rook f8. Black keeps everything protected and prepares the final phase. The rook belongs behind white's kingside pawns. Queen b6. Rook g5. The rook attacks g4. Notice the full lesson. White advanced the h-pawn and g-pawn for attacking chances, but after the queens came off, those pawns became targets. Queen b3. King h8. Black steps away from checks and prepares to convert calmly. Queen b4. Rook e8. The rook returns with tempo and keeps white tied down. Queen a4. Rook d8. Black centralizes the rook again. White has no useful checks and no passed pawn left. Queen e4. f5. The final break. Black opens the kingside on his own terms. G takes f5. Rook f8. And white resigned. Black will win the f5 pawn, the h5 pawn is weak, and the rook ending is hopeless for white. This is the modern Caro lesson. Meet the short variation with active central play, trade the attacking pieces, and then convert the advanced pawns into targets. As we saw in this lesson, Anand met the short variation with immediate central counterplay. Bishop f5 before e6, c5 against d4, timely exchanges, queen trades, and active rooks. The key lesson is that once white's attack is defused, advanced kingside pawns become endgame targets.